Welcome to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Well, David, we look at all kinds of economic indicators and market trends and so forth. Maybe we're overthinking it, David. This is from Bloomberg News. Is it a bad omen for the U.S. economy if the Philadelphia Phillies win the World Series? It's the Phillies from the National League versus the Houston Astros of the American League. And the story notes that, in previous years, in the 1980s and more recently in 2008, of course, when the Phillies won the World Series, economic disaster hit the country. And the story even goes back to the Great Depression. Now, that's the Philadelphia Athletics. Before they were in Oakland, before they were in Kansas City, they had originated in Philadelphia. But 1929 and 1930, they're hanging that on Connie Mack and the athletics teams of yesteryear. David, what do you see in your crystal ball?
Yeah, so basically the city of brotherly love does not give the love economically when their Americans' favorite pastime, baseball, goes and gets a championship. So, but this is like a favorite pastime, and so there's all kinds of chatter now with things like Twitter that you can follow. Guys come up with these unique stats, if you will, and so I just thought that was funny. That's why I sent it in to you. Obviously, that's not how we're going to manage portfolios based on the pitch count of a Philly pitcher, et cetera.
So that's just a coincidence that I saw a voodoo doll in a Phillies uniform in your office. You're not in there sticking pins in it. Okay.
Well, I just warned the Phillies. Just listen for any trash can thumping here during the World Series.
Oh, reference to those cheaters from Houston. I'm not a bitter Yankee fan. All right, moving on. In a more serious vein, David, I've got a CNBC headline for you here. Jeff Bezos is the latest to warn on the economy, saying it's time to, quote, batten down the hatches, end quote. David, when you batten down the hatches, that means there's a storm coming. There are rough seas ahead. I think this is an area where you and Mr. Bezos agree.
Oh, absolutely. And we're seeing this across all the major technology companies. So Intel, I think we talked about this a week or two ago. They're getting ready to lay off over 10,000. Jeff Bezos is kind of warning right now that they're going to have to tighten up. In fact, they built a pretty big warehouse right here in Omaha. They built one in Des Moines. They're building them all over, but they've kind of frozen. They're not really using it right now. They're kind of tightening the hatches down. We're seeing hiring freezes across technology sector. In fact, this week we just saw earnings from the big technology companies. So we had Microsoft and Google both miss pretty badly and their forecast was not rosy, and we had Amazon and Apple, and nobody had great numbers to report this week, and therefore they are telling you that they are tightening the belt. In fact, Mark Zuckerberg was, there were some videos out on Twitter of him getting quoted as saying, you better tighten up and show me what you're worth here, basically, because they are getting ready to cut off people or start layoffs. And we've been talking about this for a while. The economy is going to get through a pretty ugly recession here in the coming year, whether you want to use the traditional metrics of what a recession is or you want to go with whatever the current speak is for a recession. We will be in one next year regardless of how you
David,
measure that.
I'm confused, he said sarcastically. Our president just said the economy is, quote, strong as hell, unquote.
Right, and he didn't know where he was when he said it. But anyway, that's just my humble opinion. But hey, look, further on that is I sent you Case-Shiller. That is basically what we track housing prices nationwide in all the major cities, and we had the biggest decline month over month that we've ever seen.
Well, I want to hit you with two headlines at once and then get your take. So that's also from CNBC, as you just mentioned. Home prices cooled at a record pace in August, this S&P Case-Shiller study says. And then Fox Business headline, existing home sales tumbled to a 10-year low in September as mortgage rates skyrocket. So from August to September, it goes from bad to worse. David, we're in a whole different world than we were 6 months or a year ago in the housing market.
You cannot have things go up parabolically and have it continue. And we had markets in Northern California, in the Bay Area, San Francisco, in Arizona, and of course in South Florida that went up over 20% a year, 3 years in a row. In fact, Miami was up 28% year over year last year, as it's cited in that article. And that's unsustainable. So now, not only is the demand slowing down, people that are going to buy it, but interest rates, as you mentioned in the second article there, have driven those sales down to a 10-year low because a mortgage has drastically increased. And we're not talking about just a couple of percentage points and think, oh, maybe the mortgage costs a little more. No, a mortgage has gone up more than 120%. A $300,000 mortgage from 1 year ago is 120% more today if you took it out than for the payment that you're going to make every month. That is pretty heavy inflation, 120% more to make that mortgage payment if you were starting today. So therefore, buyers are backing away, as you would expect. And we're having about 40% of contracts from new home builders being canceled. They're saying, never mind, we don't want the house. Even if they forego a deposit, they don't care. They're backing away. And we're seeing this across the board. And I've been telling clients in reviews, look, your house is going to go backwards in value most likely over the next year, but it'll probably, the good news here for Omaha folks, locally here in the Midwest, is if we talked about, statistically speaking, we are the best city in America of the top 100 populated cities to weather an economic storm because we have such a diversified economy. And so our houses will go down in value, but not probably at the retracement level you're expecting nationwide. And again, the Federal Reserve will not publicly state this, but of course they would love to see housing correct 20% because CPI, which is what they're trying to get down, basically a third of that is housing. So if housing goes down 20%, they're going to get a third of their inflation cut automatically, which is going to help their cause. So it's not good news if you're a real estate investor, which I am, right? Houses are going to go down in value. Again, it's short-lived. Real estate will turn around and appreciate. But it's concerning because housing is a key component to the economy. Every house built generates 2.9 jobs permanently in the community with which the house is built. So if we're not going to be building as many houses, if housing is slowing down, that means job growth is going to slow down. And of course, we just talked about the big tech companies. Job cuts are now on the way. So that is usually a pretty good recipe for a recession, which again, I believe we are already in.
Well, from housing to the auto industry, another CNBC headline, Wall Street eyes auto industry earnings for signs of, quote, demand destruction, unquote. David, what is demand destruction, and what are we looking at here?
Well, this is what we actually started talking about a couple of weeks ago, right? We've been talking for 2 years on the inflation problem, and the Fed was so far behind the eight ball, and we were talking about we will start to move away from that conversation, and we're going to talk about exactly that, demand destruction. In other words, as the Fed raises interest rates and as the economy slows, we are destroying part of the demand. So as the Fed raises the interest rates, it costs more to produce goods and services if you're a company that's leveraged or borrowing money to do it. The supply chain problems are getting unwound and fixed, but now we're going to jump from an undersupply in the auto industry in this example to an oversupply most likely next summer. So while we were waiting on chips, et cetera, to come in, to get these vehicles built, now they're building them, and you're going to flip the switch to a surplus because people aren't going to be willing to buy it because they're going to be in a recession. We're going to see higher unemployment, right? Wages are going to freeze. They're not going to continue to rise as they've been rising, and therefore people are going to have less spendable dollars to purchase, and interest rates are higher. Therefore, you can afford less car, just like you can afford less house, less of a payment. And so that is going to create slower sales, and we're already seeing that data. And again, it's a cycle that we have to go through this whole economic cycle every time we do this, and that's the problem is the Federal Reserve thinks that you can have one pocket of the economy fail and then, we'll just, massage this and it's going to come back. No, you cannot fight the economic cycle. We have expansion, peak, contraction, trough. Lather, rinse, repeat. This is the way it's happened for 400 years of data that's been tracked. And so we're going to go through a recession. We've been warning people here for quite some time. Buckle up, tighten it up where you can, save a little cash, and start to trim some bills because it's not going to be friendly.
David, you often use the analogy of a pendulum when you're describing these cycles. So the pandemic was good for profits in the auto industry because the supply was limited, so that they might have sold
they got to charge a premium,
but you could sell it at top dollar. And now the pendulum is swinging back the other way because now they can ramp up the supply at the time that demand might be easing, and so that's the way that pendulum is working right now. My goodness, it's like a perfect storm brewing economically.
Well, and so, the basic advice that we can give to folks listening out there is, look, if you have to make a major purchase like a house or a car and you can delay that right now, you might want to consider doing that. And so when we're having reviews, and oftentimes we'll ask clients how they're doing, do they need any more income, et cetera, when we're doing their annual reviews with them, and do we have any major purchase? And well, we are thinking about a car at some point soon, so we'll have a discussion. Is it something we need to do immediately, or could you potentially wait about about a year, I think you'll get a much better deal. Now, if you go back and remember after the Great Recession, right, in 2010, you were getting 0% from all the major auto dealers, and they were financing for 60, 72 months, 0% rebates of $3,000 to $5,000 per vehicle, because once they have the gluttony of inventory, they need the cash. So they will sell the vehicles at cost or even at a discount to get the cash in to then start the engines back up on firing them, the factories back up, etc. And this is how the economic cycle works. And if you are at least being prudent about this with your own dollars and not in a panic or a frivolous mood to go buy something on a whim, you can actually time these purchases a little bit better and save yourself a few dollars, which will help you weather the storm.
Timing your transactions properly is part of an overall retirement plan. This is why we offer you a complimentary report card. There's no charge and no obligation. We will look at your entire financial situation. Maybe you're in good shape. Maybe you need to make a few changes. Maybe you need to time a transaction properly to maximize the benefit to you. We'll look at all of that in the report card. 402-369-7777. Complimentary report card. 402-369-7777. Up next, it is vital that your estate plan is properly integrated with your overall retirement plan, especially where taxes are concerned. That's why we partner with Estate Plan. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. The A in a SMART plan stands for advanced planning for all aspects of your retirement. That includes making sure your loved ones are taken care of after you're gone. Estate planning is a key part of your retirement plan. That's why we partner with an estate planning attorney, and he's with us today. David, please introduce our special guest.
Thank you, Chip. Yeah, once again, we have our great friend and counselor to many, our estate planning attorney, what we consider a guru. He's done this for quite some time now and helped a lot of people in our client base and has helped a lot of people in general. Colin Kastrick, hey, thanks for taking time to stop back by the studio this week.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, David.
So what I want to do in the little bit of brief time we've got this week, Colin, is I just want to talk about we are getting close to the end of the year. And one of the things we're constantly trying to encourage our audience to do is to make sure they kind of go through a checklist or things to do year end. There's a lot when it comes to holistic planning, but specific to the estate planning arena. There are so many people out there that have either way outdated documents or don't have anything at all. And this fallacy that, well, I really don't have that much. I really don't need any documents. I have a beneficiary on my 401k at work, and my spouse gets the house. Can we just talk about why, one, that's not really the way you should look at these things, why, number one, everybody should actually have estate planning documents, at least a basic set of them, and two, what you think they need to be doing here as we get close to year end.
Yeah, David, I know it's not always a fun topic to talk about, but it's so important. I always tell people, if you like your kids or you like your beneficiaries, get some kind of planning. If you don't like them, then,
And again, we're talking about if you like them long term, not maybe today.
Yeah. If you want to leave something to them and want to make their lives easier, estate planning is how you do it. You be proactive about it. And we see so many clients who say, oh, yeah, it's fine. What I have is fine, or what I have from 20 years ago will work. And what we see on a lot of these is that the documents they have, the executor named may be dead, or maybe somebody different than they wanted to. And they have their powers of attorney, and those are 20 years old. And a lot of people don't know, healthcare powers of attorney, they kind of last. Most hospitals will take older ones, but, financial powers of attorney, some of these institutions, if it's more than 3 years old and they haven't seen it, they'll deny it.
Well, yeah, we actually have the custodian that we work with 5 years and it's no longer valid. So we have to get the client to re-up or re-sign a power, POA financially, basically every 5 years. And so these are critical things. I mean, imagine you took the time and effort to spend the money to put the documents to execute the plan, but just because no one told you about updating it, et cetera, you just let dust pick up on that file maybe in the roll top desk, and then when it comes time to need it and it's no longer valid, that would make me pretty upset.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's a big problem in the estate planning world as well, is attorneys don't communicate some of these things to clients, and clients think, hey, it's one and done and it's fine. And in very few cases that is correct, but most of the time we want updated documents. Like I said, I always equate those documents to like a check for power of attorney. Walmart doesn't have to take your check. The bank doesn't have to take your power of attorney. The other thing we see with a lot of these powers of attorney that are older, especially, is that they just don't comply with the current laws. So they're simple. It used to be you could say, hey, I got a one-page document. If I own it, they can manage it, right? Make it really easy. But now with the state of Nebraska and most states want more specific clauses in there, and if they're not in there, they can't do it. And if you can't do it and that power of attorney doesn't work, guess where we're at? We're in court. And so that's every single client I have that comes in.
And that's where the legal bills just start to spin out of control, and people end up dealing with things they weren't prepared to deal with. The estate's having to deal with matters, and it's stressful. I mean, we're dealing with a bit of estate management. I've discussed with you thoroughly with my own mom and her husband that deceased earlier this year. And these are not fun things to go through. Even when people have documents in place, you need to make sure they are state specific. The other thing is we have a lot of folks that are snowbirds around here now that will spend the winters down in Florida, Texas, or Arizona, and they have to choose which state they're going to become a resident in. Now we'll talk about from the tax planning side why we think some of those other states may be a better residence choice, but. If your documents, if you're a resident of Arizona, but your will was created in Nebraska or vice versa, you may have some issues there, right?
Yeah, so most states will have reciprocity. That means they'll use other states' wills, but it's just the best practice is to get everything updated, and it's more for powers of attorney. So we want powers of attorney. Each state has their own rules for how that goes, and so yeah, if you move to a different state and you're a resident of that state, the best practice is just to get it updated with an attorney in that area who can make sure it complies with that state, and so just stuff like that people don't think about.
Well, I would tell you, I just highly recommend people understand what a financial power of attorney is. We'll oftentimes have clients that are aging and they're getting older in their late 70s, even in their 80s. We have some in their 90s. And so they decide they come in one day, I want to make my daughter a joint owner of this account. I'm like, no, we don't want to do No, I just want her in case something happens to make it easy. I'm like, no. Let me explain why you don't want to do that. You just can do the same thing with a power of attorney. Your daughter can give us instructions if you want to give her permission to do that. But if she is now on the account, we open up a can of worms for liability, lawsuits, all kinds of things that would never be intended to be able to access those assets, right?
Yeah, and we see that a lot, especially with aging clients. And we throw out these words around powers of attorney. What are these things? Like you said, essentially a power of attorney is just someone who can make a decision for you if you can't for some reason.
And of course, power of attorneys, the two main areas we're focused on for our clients is the financial one we've been talking about. There's also a healthcare power of attorney. So who can make decisions if you were incapacitated or, should we, pull the plug or not? I mean, these are very real topics you have to have discussions on. And it doesn't have to be the same person. So many times you may have one child that you give the power of attorney to make the financial decisions for you, but it might be a different child or it doesn't have to be a child at all to make the healthcare decisions. I know that's the way it's set up in our family. So talk just about the importance of understanding what those power of attorneys allow them to do and who should they be giving that access to.
Yeah, and just touch on the prior conversation there for a second is that, you don't want to put kids as owners, because when you put kids as owners on things, their liabilities go with you. So if you put your son on your house because you say, hey, it's easy, he just gets it, your son gets sued, guess what that lawsuit can take? Half your house. And so we don't want that happening. But yeah, it's really important to name correct people there. So the financial power of attorney, you want to name somebody who's good with finances. And that might be, one of your kids is really astute and well-rounded with finances. And then there might be a different kid who's a medical professional, and we want to name them for healthcare. And it's okay to name different kids. Another problem we see a lot of times is naming multiple people on those documents, right? I have clients who come and say, hey, I want to name all my kids on my power of attorney. And that's great in theory, but that means all the kids have to agree every single transaction, and it just causes an administrative nightmare every single time. I can promise you it's one of the biggest things with us attorneys.
Everybody can't be the chief, right?
You gotta name one. You gotta pick one, and then you can name it.
A successor, basically, right?
Yeah, exactly. But we don't want to name all of them first, because every time it turns into a nightmare.
Well, on as far as the estate planning, we at least had some relief or some good news here as we roll over to the calendar year next year when it comes to Nebraska's inheritance tax, one of only about 6 states that still imposes such a tax. But we are going to get a reduction starting next year, right?
Yeah, we got a reduction here for all of the rates, which are still pretty high. But we got an up in the exemption there. So it used to be that you could pass $40,000 per kid free. Now it's $100,000 plus life insurance. And then what we're doing is we're lowering those rates from the 18% down to the 15%, and then 13% down to the 11% those are really high still, but they're for unrelated parties. So just know if you're leaving something to your neighbor, they still got a hefty bill. It's just decreased a little bit.
And so what he's talking about, we have 3 tiers basically of inheritance tax here. So we have your direct relatives. This is mom, dad, brother, sister, your kids, etc. Yep. Then we have tier 2, which is kind of like that arm's length relative, maybe a cousin or something that's nieces, nephews, etc. They have to pay what 13% now, right?
11% now.
But it's going to 11.
Yeah, 13% to 11%.
13 is going to go down to they'll pay an 11% inheritance tax on anything over the $100,000 limit. But then your non-relative is going to pay 15% next year. Currently 18%, right?
Yeah, pretty ridiculous in Nebraska.
Well, where this catches people, and I just had a couple in this week. They've done a really good job. They both are divorced. They live together and have lived together for some time, but they're not married. And they have about $4 million assets between them. And they both just want to leave each other as the beneficiary. And I'm like, you understand you're not related. Therefore, you would pay today an 18% tax on the bulk of that estate. And they had no idea. This is so common. So, folks, if you're cohabitating, let's face it, it's 2022, almost 2023. This is very common, especially in, what used to be second marriages. A lot of people don't want to go through the legal stuff of getting married again, but you need to understand how the laws work in the state that you live. So these topics and a lot more are going to be covered in our Estate Planning 101 course that Colin here actually teaches with one of our advisors, Mike Schudel, who also has a law degree, and they do a really good job covering this. When is that course coming up, Colin? When are you guys doing that next?
We're doing two of them, one on November 2nd, one on November 3rd. And so, I'm trying to catch up to Mike on designations. I think he's got like 8 of them behind his name.
Yeah.
So.
I always joke with him. He's always the most learned advisor I've ever met. In fact, he was on the show, I think, last week with us. And but these classes, we found the response has been overwhelmingly positive from folks that come to these courses where you guys kind of go through the basics of understanding what a will is, why you need it, what the power of attorneys are, what types there are, how and why you would want those. And then you even get into a little bit of the basics of like HIPAA releases. People don't understand how important it is to have these type of documents. Hospitals can't release information, if they don't have the permission to give it away, and they take this stuff pretty seriously. So all this stuff is covered in the Estate Planning 101 course. If you would like to get registered for that, we'd like you to give us a call now at 402-369-7777. Again, 402-369-7777. That is going to be on either Wednesday night, November 2nd, or Thursday night, November 3rd. You don't have to come to both. It's just one. It's about an hour to an hour and 20-minute class, depending on how much these guys feel like talking. But they go through a lot of content, and at that time, you can schedule a complimentary consultation with Colin to just look over currently what you currently have, and he will not charge you. We've bend his arm over for this here so that he can get a consultation with him complimentary. So any final thoughts there on what the people need to just know they need to do before the year end, Colin?
Yeah, just schedule a time, have that conversation, sit down maybe with your kids or with your spouse, and make sure those documents are in place, because you never know when you're going to need them, and when you need them, it's too late.
Very cool. All right, we are out of time for this segment. Thank you, Colin, for stopping by. I think it's time for Q&A coming up next, Chip. Is that right?
Indeed it is, David. Up next, you have questions. David Brooks has answers. Q&A is next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Into the Q&A we go. David, the first question is about challenges people face in retirement. My husband and I are in our mid-50s and have saved nearly $1 million for retirement, but we do not have a retirement plan. What are the top 3 challenges we are likely to face in retirement, and how do you address them?
So there's quite a few challenges you're going to face in retirement. The first one is we would need to understand first what those challenges are, is when you would plan to retire, right? So depending on how long you plan on working, the first thing is you have a risk factors to consider. You've acquired $1 million. I don't know how those dollars are invested or where they're parked at the moment, but if you were retiring in 2 or 3 years, you definitely would want to back down that risk quite a bit if it's something we're going to need to access those funds in the very near future. If you're not retiring for, say, 10, 15 years, you could afford to take a little bit more risk, typically speaking. Now, so one we need to understand is what is the risk allocation on your current portfolio relative to the time horizon when you think you're first going to need to access those funds. And then 2, we need to understand, you're going to understand something called sequence of returns, right? The market is going to average what the market is going to average, and we've got 100 plus years of data, right? So the S&P typically is going to do over 8% on the long-term average. However, it doesn't just give us a linear return, right? We don't just get that every single year. So we go through the economic cycles we were talking about, and the market has its own cycles. Now, the market is typically a leading indicator. In other words, the market is moving typically 6 to 9 months historically ahead of the economy. It's telling you so when the market's going down, it's telling you the economy is going to be going down in the future. When the market's going up, it's telling you things are looking pretty good. That's from a historical standpoint. So sequence of returns, if you happen to retire, let's just go back about 2 decades ago, Chip, around the turn of the century in year 2000, 2001, and 2002, we had 3 double-digit negative years in a row on the S&P 500. If you happen to retire January 1st, 2000, sequence of returns harmed you really quite a bit if you did not have a risk-adjusted portfolio as you stepped into retirement. Versus if you just reversed the order of the last 20 years and retired, it would have been a totally different picture if you're taking income out. So it's understanding sequence of returns in the income drawing phase of retirement is critical. And then the third one is understanding what are your biggest expenses going to be, and that is taxes, number 1, and healthcare, number 2. And this is stuff that most financial advisors don't have the skill set or the resources to explain to clients, yet it's the 2 biggest expenses facing the average retiree. And so you want to find somebody, a financial professional out there that can help guide you through that. We would love to be that person for most people, but of course we're not going to be the answer for everyone. But whoever you choose, we believe you should find somebody who's a fiduciary-based advisor, somebody who's legally going to put it in writing. They need to do what's in your best interest, not work off of just a suitability recommendation and sell you stuff. And they're going to build you a holistic financial plan. We call ours a SMART plan, and we think we cover all these factors. But it's a great question. So they've done the work accumulating dollars, but you're right. The questioner here, having dollars in an account is not a plan. You need to actually have a retirement plan. And the first step here would be to get what we call a report card. And that just gives you that 30,000-foot overview on the 5 key areas we believe are essential to a successful retirement.
Well, if you have a financial advisor who's saying, well, go talk to an accountant about your taxes, wow. Tax planning has to be part of that overall comprehensive, holistic retirement plan. Dave, the next question is about quality of life in retirement, and you actually are very passionate about this. My wife and I are in our late 50s and preparing to retire within a decade. We feel like our numbers are solid, but we have no sense of what everyday life will be like in retirement. When you build a retirement plan, do you go beyond the numbers? Well, I know the answer to that is yes. The A in a SMART plan is to cover, it's advanced planning for all the factors that affect your quality of life in retirement. David, you love bucket lists.
Oh, absolutely. And so we actually have a book we send a lot of people called The Perfect Day. And what we're trying to do is get to the root of what makes you happy, right? So if you walk away from your job, and you got to remember, a lot of people don't realize how much satisfaction they get in their daily walk from job satisfaction. You go because you're performing a task, you feel valued at the company you work for or the business that you run. And so there is a sense of achievement, even if it's the smallest task you're doing every day. But that is really important to the psyche. And when people retire with no idea of what they're going to do, some get depressed. And this is a reality. We are part psychologists sometimes. I joke when we're part therapists when we're working with people. Some people, when they go into retirement, they come back in for a review 6 months after they retire, Chip, and they're like, I don't know how I had time for a job. I don't know where I fit. I don't know where I fit the 40 hours of the job in there. I'm so busy. Other people are like, yeah, we just haven't really done anything. And so we encourage people to think about this prior to retirement. And we have exercises we'll do. In fact, one of the exercises we do on the quality of life issues, sometimes I'll sit down and just hand a yellow pad to both a husband and wife if I got a married couple in front of me, and I'll ask them, all right, if we're retired, if that's tomorrow, like we might be building a plan for 3 years, but let's say tomorrow is day 1 of retirement, Chip, write down the top 5 things you want to accomplish in your retirement, and I'll ask the spouse to do the same thing. And what's hilarious is 1, 2, and 3 are almost on both lists. They might be in different orders, but number 4 and number 5, they've never even told the spouse this is something they wanted to do. I mean, like, you guys know me because of all the stuff I talk about here, but like one of mine, I used to ride motorcycles a lot, taught my wife how to drive a motorcycle and had a lot of fun. But once we had kids, I agreed that I would sell the motorcycle. I put away the toys until our kids were an adult, right? So there was no surprise to my wife. The weekend my son became an adult, my youngest became became an adult, that weekend he got a little birthday gift, but I got a Harley, and because that was one of my little bucket list items.
That Harley's been to Sturgis at least once.
So yes,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so it's good to have fun and have goals, but we joke about it, Chip. It's called the go-go years, right? That's what we refer to. The first 5 to 7 years of retirement are the go-go years. If travel is, for instance, I love travel. My wife, not so much, right? She'll tolerate some of it with me, but I love to go someplace new every year. I want to go to a bucket list place. I want to visit a new restaurant I've never eaten at. I like new experiences. But whether you just want to dote on the grandkids, you want to restore a car, you want to be a world traveler, you should have a conversation with whoever's building your financial plan to make sure the plan will accommodate those things. In fact, we will what we call front load income. I'd like to give you the average person extra 10 to 15% in income those first 5 to 7 years so they can do those things without any fear of running out of money. And a good financial plan can accommodate it. Because after the go-go years, Chip, comes the slow-go years and then the no-go years. I'm dealing with that with my parents right now. Unfortunately, we've stepped into the no-go years with both my parents. So these are the realities of retirement, and your financial planner should be able to help you understand the metrics and how it goes. So yes, it's way more than just the numbers.
Well, I hope listeners, I hope you're appreciating that, because I imagine sometimes, financial conversations as we have, it sounds like they're always chasing dollars and optimizing portfolios and maximizing returns and so forth. And yes, that is part of it. But why? Why do we do all this? To what's being maximized is your quality of life in retirement, taking care of your loved ones, as David and Colin were talking about in the previous segment, and helping make the world a better place, supporting your favorite charities and so forth. There's a bigger purpose. I would call it, David, a missionary purpose to what we're doing here. And I just want to make sure that you get a slice of that, friends. All right. Well, David, final question here. You were just talking about dabbling in marriage and family counseling sometimes as a financial advisor. And this one's about navigating family dynamics. I'm a retired 77-year-old widow. I'm in good shape financially, and I want to help my grandchildren with college and getting launched in life. But I don't want to work with or through their parents. I love my daughter and son-in-law, but they are a mess with finances. I want to directly aid the grandchildren without involving the parents. Is that possible? I guess what I'm really asking is that possible without damaging family relationships? David, have you had to navigate these waters before?
We have. In fact, I had a conversation on this very topic yesterday with someone, with a client. So to answer his question, is it possible? The answer is yes. Is it possible to do it without any damaging of financial dynamics? That depends, okay? Because I don't know all ins and outs of the relationship. Now, the questioner does let us know they're 77. So typically your generation is going to be 20 to 25 years behind. So if we knocked 50 years, that would mean these grandkids are most likely adults at this time. I don't know that, but it sounds like they would be in their early 20s or mid 20s on the average age. And so depending if the grandchildren are minors or are adults would matter significantly here on some of the things that we may be able to suggest. But number one, yes, you can easily and clearly set up a plan to benefit the grandchildren without the parents being involved. They don't have to know it exists, frankly. Number two, it's better if they do. But there are additional plans or options available if you involve the grandparents that could still make sure the money is not available to them. So they couldn't mess up your plan, but there are some things we could recommend that they would just need to know exist, and especially if the kids were minors in this example. So yes, you can accomplish what you want, and we completely understand that you're a little nervous about your daughter and her husband maybe being a financial mess. They might be a good candidate for one of these 15-minute calls we offer every week, by the way. You might, and appreciate that you listen. So the answer is yes, you can accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. The question would be, at what capacity do you want to help them? I mean, how significant? There are gifting rules that we need to follow and things like that. And what is the outcome? Do you want to help them immediately today with like getting their financial life started, buying their first house, paying for college or student loans, things like that? Or are you talking about helping them just acquire assets that will long-term help them out so they'll have a secure retirement? And because those decisions would change some of the recommendations. But we've got a wild array of strategies that could really help you hone in and help those kids. And you would be a perfect person to take advantage of our 15-minute phone call. We have 6 of those available this week, Chip.
Half dozen of those. Well, good, because we're out of time for Q&A this week, but 6 opportunities there. Call in and schedule a 15-minute phone conference with one of our financial advisors. No charge, no obligation. 402-369-7777 for a complimentary 15-minute phone conference with one of our advisors. 402-369-7777. Up next, the amount of daylight and the temperatures are decreasing as we move closer to winter. One thing that won't decrease this winter is your heating bill. We'll tell you about it next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. David, Omaha World Herald headline, buckle in for higher heating bills in Nebraska this winter. I guess it's the old bugaboo inflation, plus there is a prediction of somewhat colder temperatures this season. Here it comes.
Yeah, we're in. Unfortunately, the prediction is for a colder than usual season here in the Midwest, from basically Omaha up all the way through Minnesota. We're expecting to get a colder winter than normal, and that doesn't bode well when we're expected to pay much higher dollars for the heating of our homes, whether it's through gas or electricity. And I'm blessed to have a couple of clients that work for most of the organizations here. So we have clients that work for both, or for all three, basically MUD, MUD as we call them, OPPD, and for Black Hills, right? And that's who I get the gas for my home. And my wife we have mainly all gas appliances, which is typically saves us money on the water heater and the stove and the range, et cetera, and the dryer. But we also have a gas fireplace. And once, my wife grew up in Florida, so when we get below 40 degrees, that fireplace comes on way more often than I would like it to.
Well, and it's the natural gas prices that are going to drive the increase, right?
Yeah, and so all energy is going to cost more, but natural gas is really expected to spike. And according to this, MUD is estimating residential customers will pay about 18% more on average for their bill. Now, that's if it was a normal winter. They go on to talk about the U.S. Energy Information Administration is saying if it's a colder than normal winter in your area, you could expect a 50% increase in your utility bill. 50%, that will literally take some people away from literally with the inflationary prices they're facing in groceries and other things. They will not be able to pay their bill. Now, there are assistance programs available. So if you're out there listening and you find yourself, please call right now, OPPD or MUD, whoever your provider is, and let them tell you about the programs because they do offer a discount. In other words, they can let you catch up the payments later. They will offer this, but you have to sign up. And then we also have some local organizations through the United Way that will offer some assistance to customers who won't be able to afford it. But when I've been telling clients for the last 6 weeks or so in reviews, is like, listen, if you're not on what they call balanced billing with the utility company, they will take your average bill year round and just kind of bill you that every month. You may want to consider signing up on that so you don't have this 200% increase in your bill coming up here in 2 months or so when the colder weather really hits, because we're not even there yet, but I've already seen an increase quite a bit in my Black Hills bill. So please buckle up, make sure you're prepared to pay these utility bills this winter.
David, it's an eclectic mix of stories we have in the final segment here. The next one, I almost hesitate to bring this up because I know this triggers you for economic reasons as well as political and cultural, but nonetheless, a major decision out of New York, the New York State Supreme Court. Here's the Fox News headline. New York Supreme Court reinstates all employees fired for being unvaccinated, orders back pay. Vindication here, David.
Absolutely, but unfortunately, the damage is done, right? You've had people that have probably moved on. Some have taken new jobs, but people were terminated. And of course, this is not here, but everywhere. All over the country, we saw people fired or set out. In fact, just this past week, I saw a news story on a lady who was the brand management team. She was like from the CEO of Levi Strauss, right, the jeans maker, and she lived in San Francisco. And she had the audacity to speak up about the way the San Francisco school system was treating people.
She's becoming a crusader against woke
Yeah,
culture.
She's got a book, and
Yep.
she had basically got terminated or was forced to quit. Basically,
Yep.
She quit. She did resign, but anyway. So this idea that people that that didn't want to get a vaccine were, oh, this is bad, you're going to kill the world. Well, number one, we now have factual data from the drug companies that these vaccines, Pfizer in particular, do not prevent transmission at all. In fact, they never even tested it, yet they were out there, the CEO saying this would prevent transmission.
You can still get it, and you can still transmit it.
And of
even
course,
with the vaccine.
there's plenty of people that show that's happening. So again, look, you make your own choice, on what you want to put in your body on the vaccines, et cetera. But this at least gives some vindication to those that decided to fight against that and now are going to be off their jobs back. And I think this will create a domino effect of lawsuits across the country with companies and governments and even our military. Hopefully that those folks that were being forced to be discharged will get the opportunity to go back and sign up and serve our country if they choose. But again, this is, they're playing politics with it, and you got the New York mayor, Eric Adams, there trying to act like, well, I didn't do it. And that's the other thing, is now they're all saying, well, it wasn't me. Fauci's like, it wasn't my idea, and yes, it was. And they're all on videotape, et cetera, spreading the lie or the rhetoric, if you will, that they did. In my humble opinion, I think these people have a right to get compensated for back pay, et cetera. So there will be lawsuits that come out of this. It'll be interesting. The lawyers will be running the ads everywhere, I think, along with the Camp Lejeune ads you can't stop seeing right now, right? So, but yeah, this is, this is a win for the little guy.
Okay, speaking of the little guy, I was glad to see union reps for the firefighters come out and call out the city on this. See, there was an exception to this for athletes and performers, big shots and woke lefties coming through town performing or competing in sports in New York. They got a pass. And the union reps, the firefighters said, people who work for New York City ought to get the same exemption as those who work in New York City, the big shots, And so I was glad to see that, as you say, a victory for the little guy, the regular guy. We'll see how this plays out.
Absolutely.
Across the country. David, in the time we have left, I want you to break down for us the IRS code. Here's a CNBC headline. Here are the new income tax brackets for 2023. Well, this is right in our wheelhouse at Retire Smart. What do we need to know as individuals, and what does it mean for the economy and the markets? Give us your take, David.
So at first glance, in general, let's talk about it. It's probably good news for most people on a small win. In other words, we're increasing how much income, Chip, you can earn in each tax bracket, right? So we have 7 tax brackets. So we have income taxed at 10%, then you go to 12%, then you go to 22%, then you're going to go up to 24%, and then you're going to move up to 32%, and then you're going to go 35%, and then to 37%. Those are the brackets today, and that will stay that way unless elections don't go the way I think. That could change next year, but that's the bracket system we have today. Now, how much income you can get in each bracket is what is being just released by the IRS, and this is one of the biggest increases in those brackets in history. Is about 6.7%. So we're going to be able to have more income in each bracket before you jump to the next bracket. But here's the thing. A lot of people don't realize, Chip, is in the Tax and Job Act of 2017, otherwise known as Trump's tax cut, we changed how these brackets get calculated for inflation. What are senior citizens getting next year? We talked about last week for inflationary bump, the COLA for government stuff.
You're talking about Social Security, 8.7.
That's used to be how we bumped your brackets. No more. So now the brackets going forward forever will inflate at a slower rate than inflation. Therefore, this is a hidden tax increase on Americans.
Oh, because you're going to stumble into that next bracket.
You're going to go to the next bracket faster than you would have. Absolutely.
Yeah,
and a lot of people don't realize this is a hidden tax. Now, this is a trade-off that was made when they created the bill. And again, I try to explain this all the time. Nobody's the superhero conservative. Nobody's the far lefty. They have to make trade-offs to get these bills written and get them done, right? Reagan's the reason we pay tax on Social Security and Medicare today, okay, and the way we do it, right? That was what he did to get tax rates from 70 down to 20, and it was a good decision because the economic growth we've never seen since, right? And then we had Clinton and Clinton and Newt Gingrich come together, and Newt Gingrich had the deal for America, but Clinton, a Democratic president, was able to foster economic growth by meeting in the meeting of the minds. And of course, we're just not in that political environment today where you see much of this. But this was part that got some of the more moderate Republicans to sign off on this tax legislation. So therefore, it's a hidden tax, and unfortunately, this is what's going to make senior citizens in particular pay more taxes in retirement. So this also ties into the Secure Act, Chip, where you're forced to take money out of your retirement accounts, your IRA, 403b, 401k, et cetera, called required minimum distributions. And so the age moved from 70.5 to 72, and it's going to move to 75 when they pass Secure Act 2.0, which passed both the House and Senate this year, has not been reconciled into one package or signed into law, but we do anticipate that happening next year. You're going to have to pay bigger distributions, which is going to pull seniors into a higher tax bracket. And according to the IRS, their own study, 37% more of seniors will pay tax on their Social Security going forward than they used to. So in other words, more Social Security will get taxed, and Social Security, folks, is only taxed if you have other taxable income. And I know this is complicated stuff. This is why we believe it is so important to understand. You need to have whoever's going to help you build your financial plan for retirement needs to have some command of the tax code and the specific of how it reflects the way you're going to get income. And everybody's going to have different sources of income. And this is what we built the SMART plan to do, is help you understand where those sources of income are coming from and how they will be taxed. Because what it really boils down to, Chip, how much do you get to keep? How much money in your pocket every month is really yours? And we're trying to help as many people as we can. We keep expanding. I mean, by the way, we just welcomed a couple more employees this week to the firm here. We just keep on growing, and we've been blessed to help so many people. But if you're out there, folks, and you've never had somebody run a real financial plan for you, I would implore you to take action and take heed, especially as we're coming to the end of the year. Time is of the essence. Some of the strategies can go away.
David, when I introduce you at public events, one of the things I say is withdrawing or transferring the right amount of money from the right account at the right time can save you hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes over the course of your retirement. This is what we're talking about. Don't accidentally stumble into a higher tax bracket if you don't need to. Our strategies can help with that. That's what the report card is for. We'll check out your whole financial situation and see where you might be able to restructure things, or as we've been saying today, time the transactions properly so that you don't get walloped with unexpected tax liabilities in retirement. Now, if you just like to dip a toe in the water, we have 6 opportunities for a 15-minute phone conversation with one of our licensed advisors. Give us a call at 402-369-7777 to get one of those 15-minute phone conferences. Don't forget about the Estate Planning 101 workshop coming up Wednesday, November 2nd or Thursday, November 3rd, right here at the Midwest Learning Center at Retire Smart, 6:30 in the evening, Wednesday, November 2nd or Thursday, November 3rd. But you need to register. We need to know you're coming. 402-369-7777. David, bring us home.
Hey, you're not going to miss next week's show. It'll be our election coverage show right before the midterm elections. Elections have consequences, so pay attention and get educated. Have a blessed week.
Thank you for listening to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. For David Brooks and the entire team at Retire Smart, have a great week.